The first thing Admiral Sevrax noticed was not the silence, it was how perfect the silence felt. Earth hung before his fleet like an untouched jewel, blue oceans reflecting starlight, continents calm and unscarred, orbital traffic minimal, defense grids dormant. There were no emergency broadcasts, no panicked evacuations, no desperate fleets scrambling to intercept. For a species that had been given 6 months to prepare for extinction, humanity looked undisturbed. As if the threat had never mattered. That should have been impossible. "Confirm planetary status," Sevrax ordered, his voice steady but edged with something he did not name. "Confirmed, Admiral," the sensor officer replied after a brief pause. "No large-scale military mobilization detected. Civilian infrastructure is operational. No visible fortifications beyond standard orbital platforms." Standard. The word settled into the bridge like a foreign object. Sevrax had crushed civilizations older than this one. He had seen worlds burn themselves hollow in fear long before his fleets arrived. He had watched empires fracture, leaders beg, populations collapse into chaos. That was the pattern. That was how intelligent species behaved when confronted with superior force. But Earth was behaving incorrectly. "Begin surface strike," Sevrax said. There was no hesitation. The command rippled outward, transmitted across thousands of warships. Energy cannons aligned. Targeting arrays locked onto infrastructure nodes, communication hubs, orbital stations. The fleet fired in perfect synchronization, a storm of light tearing through the quiet of the system. Explosions bloomed across Earth's orbital ring. Stations shattered. Satellites vanished. Defensive platforms, if they could be called that, collapsed almost instantly under the barrage. There was no coordinated counterattack. No retaliation. Just destruction, clean and efficient, exactly as expected. And yet, Sevrax felt it again. That quiet. "Admiral," another officer spoke, more cautiously this time. "We are receiving minimal distress signals. Civilian channels are limited." Limited. Sevrax turned his head slightly. "Explain." "There are transmissions," the officer said slowly, as if trying to understand it while speaking. "But they are not consistent with mass panic. They are structured, coordinated, almost like—" He stopped. "Like what?" Sevrax pressed. "Like they are following a script." A ripple of unease passed through the bridge. Sevrax's gaze returned to the planet. His fleet had just crippled Earth's orbital defenses in under 3 minutes. By every metric, the invasion had begun flawlessly. There was no resistance, no strategy, no adaptation. It was victory. So why did it feel like a mistake? "Deploy ground reconnaissance," Sevrax ordered. "I want visual confirmation of urban response." Dropships descended through the atmosphere within minutes, piercing clouds and entering major population centers. Feeds began streaming back to the flagship, streets, cities, infrastructure. Empty. Not abandoned in chaos. Not evacuated in panic. Empty with intent. Vehicles parked in precise alignments. Doors left unlocked. Power grids still running, lights still on, systems still active. Sevrax leaned forward slightly. "They left," someone whispered. "No," Sevrax said quietly. "They moved." The feeds shifted. One of the recon teams entered a central communication hub, expecting to find either resistance or evidence of collapse. Instead, they found something else entirely, a single terminal still active, a message looping across its interface in human language. The translation system processed it instantly. Phase 1 complete. The message paused for a fraction of a second before continuing. They took the bait. Sevrax's claws tightened against the armrest. For the first time since entering the system, he did not feel like a conqueror. He felt like something that had just stepped exactly where it was supposed to. The word spread through the fleet faster than any official command. Not because it was broadcast, but because no one could ignore it. They took the bait. Sevrax did not allow speculation on his bridge. He had crushed officers for less than whispered uncertainty, and yet even here, in the most disciplined command vessel of the Armada, silence had turned heavy. Every sensor report, every transmission, every fragment of data now carried a second weight, interpretation. "Report," he said again, sharper this time. "Ground reconnaissance confirms major population centers are vacated," the operations officer replied. "No signs of mass casualties. No evidence of chaotic evacuation. Movement appears deliberate." "How long?" Sevrax asked. A pause. "Unknown, Admiral. There are no residual heat signatures, no traffic anomalies, no distress clusters. It is as if the relocation occurred gradually, well before our arrival." That answer was wrong in a way that could not be measured. 6 months. That was the ultimatum the Dominion had given. 6 months for surrender or annihilation. More than enough time for panic, for resistance, for desperation. More than enough time for a primitive species to fracture under pressure. But not for this. "Scan subterranean layers," Sevrax ordered. "All major urban grids. I want life signs." Sensors shifted, penetrating the crust beneath the cities. Data flooded in, structural layouts, geological maps, thermal pockets. And then, "Nothing," the officer said quietly. "No life." Sevrax's voice dropped. "Not in expected densities. There are traces, faint, scattered, but not enough to account for planetary population." Sevrax did not respond immediately. A species did not simply disappear. Not one at this scale. Not without noise. "Then where are they?" another officer muttered, forgetting protocol for a fraction of a second. Sevrax did not reprimand him, because it was the correct question. The fleet advanced deeper into the system, establishing control zones, securing orbital paths, isolating communication channels. It was procedure, methodical, efficient, proven across hundreds of campaigns. Every conquered world followed the same pattern: dominance, suppression, stabilization. But Earth was not following the pattern. Supply routes were established with ease. No resistance. No sabotage. No interference. Too easy. "Admiral," the Intelligence Division finally spoke, their tone carrying something new. "We have completed preliminary analysis of intercepted human transmissions prior to our arrival. Proceed. There is no evidence of panic escalation. No emergency mobilization patterns. Instead, there is evidence of long-term coordination." Sevrax turned slightly. "Define long-term." "Decades," the officer said. The word did not belong in this context. "Explain." "Human communications indicate the existence of distributed protocols embedded across their civilization. Not military-only structures, civilian systems, trade networks, infrastructure grids. All of it appears dual purpose." "Dual purpose how?" "Adaptive," the officer replied. "Every system can shift function. Production lines, transportation corridors, energy grids, they are not fixed. They can be repurposed rapidly. Almost instantly." Sevrax's gaze sharpened. "That is inefficient," he said. "No species designs an entire civilization around contingency warfare. It limits growth." "Agreed," the officer said. "And yet, they did." A quiet settled again. Sevrax had studied countless species. He understood their patterns, their limitations, their predictable evolution toward stability, efficiency, and comfort. This was not that. "Admiral," another voice cut in, urgent now. "We are detecting movement at the outer edge of the system." Sevrax's attention snapped to the display. "Identify." "Small vessels," the tactical officer reported. "Minimal signatures. Likely civilian craft." "Intercept." The fleet responded instantly. Precision strikes eliminated the targets before they could accelerate beyond escape vectors. Debris scattered into the void. Clean. Controlled. Predictable. And yet, "Admiral," the officer said again, slower this time, "those vessels did not attempt evasive maneuvers." Sevrax's eyes narrowed. "They allowed destruction?" "Yes." "Why?" No one answered. Because the question had no place in war. Species fought to survive. They fled when outmatched. They resisted when cornered. They adapted to preserve themselves. They did not choose to be destroyed. Sevrax leaned back slightly, studying the expanding debris field. Something about the pattern, its spacing, its distribution, felt intentional. But that was absurd. "Continue system consolidation," he ordered. "Maintain pressure. If they intend to hide, we will force them into the open." Commands flowed. Fleets repositioned. Control tightened. And still, nothing. No counterattack. No resistance. Only absence. Until... "Admiral," the intelligence officer said, voice tightening. "We have intercepted another transmission. Source: unknown." It appeared briefly across multiple frequencies before vanishing. "Display it." The bridge screens flickered. A short burst of human language appeared, translated instantly. "Phase 2 initiated." A pause. Then a second line. "They are advancing exactly as predicted. No coordinates. No origin. No trace." Sevrax stared at the message for a long moment. For the first time in his command history, he did not feel like he was leading an invasion. He felt like he was walking deeper into something that had already been decided. And somewhere, unseen, the humans were watching him do it. By the fourth day, the Dominion controlled everything that mattered. Orbital superiority had been established across every major approach vector. Long-range communication arrays were suppressed or rerouted. The outer colonies had fallen without resistance, their stations intact, their systems still operational, their populations gone without trace. Even the automated defense grids, primitive by Dominion standards, had been neutralized with such ease that several commanders began to question whether humanity had ever intended to defend them at all. On record, it was a flawless campaign. In reality, it was becoming something else. "Admiral, we've mapped the primary transit corridors between inter-system installations," the navigation officer reported. "They are unusually optimized." Sevrax did not look away from the display. Optimized how? Efficient, but not in a conventional sense. The routes funnel traffic into predictable channels, but they also limit maneuverability. It's as if they were designed to control movement rather than accelerate it. Sevrax's gaze shifted slightly. "You're suggesting infrastructure as constraint." "Yes," the officer said. "Every major route narrows at critical junctions. Every corridor has natural choke points. It would be very easy to control or isolate fleets moving through them." "Or trap them," another voice added quietly. No one acknowledged the comment, but it lingered. "Adjust fleet distribution," Sevrax ordered. "No concentration within confined vectors. Maintain dispersion." The command was executed immediately. Ships repositioned, formations widened, routes diversified. And yet, something about the system itself resisted that freedom. The deeper they moved toward Earth's inner orbit, the more the environment seemed structured. Asteroid clusters arranged in unnatural densities. Debris fields that forced course corrections. Signal distortions that bent sensor readings just enough to introduce uncertainty. None of it was aggressive. None of it was overt. But it was not random. "Admiral," Tactical Control interrupted, urgency creeping into the tone. "We have contact." Sevrax turned. Details. Unidentified vessels emerging from behind asteroid cluster Gamma 7. Small signatures. Minimal armament. Engage. Dominion ships pivoted, weapons aligning with mechanical precision. The targets moved, not away, not defensively, but laterally, slipping between asteroid shadows with deliberate timing. "They're not retreating," the officer said. "They're repositioning." For what? The answer came seconds later. The asteroids moved. Not physically, but something within them activated. Hidden structures unfolded from rock surfaces, panels splitting open to reveal concealed emitters. Energy flared, not directed at the Dominion fleet, but into the surrounding space itself. "Distortion field," the sensor officer shouted. "They're disrupting targeting systems." Sevrax's display fractured into overlapping data streams. Lock-on sequences failed. Range calculations warped. For a brief, disorienting moment, the battlefield became uncertain. Then the human ship struck. Not with overwhelming force, but with precision. Missiles emerged from unexpected vectors, guided through the distortion field with impossible accuracy. A Dominion cruiser took the first hit, its shields destabilized before it could recalibrate. The second strike pierced directly through its core, detonating it in a silent flash of light. "Return fire!" Sevrax snapped. Weapons discharged, but the targets were already gone, vanishing back into the asteroid cluster, their signatures dissolving into the same interference they had created. The distortion collapsed seconds later. Silence returned. "Damage report," Sevrax demanded. "One cruiser destroyed," came the reply. 2 others damaged. Enemy losses unconfirmed. Sevrax stared at the empty space where the attack had occurred. "That was not a defensive maneuver," he said slowly. "No, Admiral," the tactical officer agreed. "It was selective." The word settled heavily. They had not tried to win. They had chosen which ship to destroy. "Why that target?" Sevrax asked. A pause. "Unknown," the officer admitted. "But it was positioned at the center of our formation at the time of engagement." Sevrax's mind moved quickly, reconstructing the sequence. The narrowing corridors. The forced positioning. The controlled routes. "They shaped our formation," he said. "Yes." "And then they struck the center." "Yes." "Not random. Not reactive. Planned." "Admiral," intelligence cut in again, more urgently than before. "We've recovered fragments from the destroyed cruiser's data logs." "Show me." The display shifted, reconstructing the final moments before impact. Sensor feeds, targeting data, system diagnostics. And then something else. A signal. Brief. Embedded. Almost invisible. Translated instantly. Adjustment confirmed. Sevrax's claws tightened again. "They're learning," someone whispered. "No," Sevrax said, his voice lower now, colder. "They already learned." He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the expanding map of the system. Every movement his fleet had made. Every route chosen. Every formation adjusted. All of it was visible. All of it was being watched. And now, for the first time, there was proof. The humans were not hiding. They were guiding. Another alert flashed across the console. "Admiral," the officer said, tension unmistakable. Multiple new contacts, appearing across different sectors. "How many?" "Dozens." Sevrax did not speak immediately, because the pattern was becoming clear. They were not facing an enemy that resisted invasion. They were facing one that was controlling it. And the deeper they went, the more precisely that control tightened. For the first time since entering human space, Sevrax understood something with absolute certainty. They were no longer advancing. They were being positioned. And whatever waited at the end of that positioning had not yet revealed itself. By the 7th day, the Dominion fleet still held the advantage. That was what the report said. They controlled orbitals, secured key transit lanes, and maintained numerical superiority across every major engagement zone. Their losses, while unexpected, were statistically insignificant compared to the scale of their force. Any other campaign would have already been classified as a decisive success. And yet no one on Sevrax's bridge used that word anymore. Because the deeper they pushed into the system, the less it felt like conquest, and the more it felt like permission. "Admiral, long-range comms are degrading again," the communications officer reported. "Signal delays increasing between divisions. We're experiencing desynchronization across outer fleets. Cause unknown. There's no direct interference pattern. It's subtle, fluctuating." Sevrax didn't like subtle. Reinforce relay nodes. Establish hardline redundancies. It's already been attempted. The distortions shift with each recalibration. Sevrax's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then they're not targeting our systems," he said quietly. "They're targeting our responses." No one replied, but no one disagreed. Across the system, Dominion formations began to fragment, not by order, but by necessity. Fleets adjusted to maintain local control, isolating sectors, reinforcing perceived weak points. It was logical, tactical, standard response to unpredictable resistance. It was also exactly what the humans wanted. The first major fracture came without warning. Admiral! Tactical control snapped to life. We've lost contact with 3rd Division in Sector Delta. Sevrax turned instantly. Clarify. Last transmission indicated minor engagement, then total blackout. No distress call. No debris field. No residual energy signatures. Impossible. Yes, Admiral. Sevrax stood now, stepping closer to the central display. Reconstruct their last known position. The map shifted, highlighting a region near a dense asteroid formation, intersected by multiple transit corridors. A logical staging area. A defensible position. A perfect place to vanish. Deploy reconnaissance, Sevrax ordered. Full spectrum scan. Drones were launched within seconds, slipping into the sector with silent precision. Their feeds streamed back in fragmented bursts, rock formations, empty space, sensor distortions. And then, Admiral, the officer said slowly, we're detecting energy echoes. Not current emissions, residual patterns. From what? Weapons fire. Extensive. How extensive? A pause. Total engagement level. Sevrax's gaze hardened. Show me the timeline. The data reconstructed itself, delayed, incomplete, but enough to form a picture. 3rd Division had entered the sector in formation. Standard patrol pattern. No immediate threats detected. Then, subtle course adjustments. Slight shifts in positioning. Minor deviations that seemed insignificant in isolation. Until they weren't. They were separated, Sevrax said, watching the sequence unfold. Yes, the officer confirmed. Not by force. By movement. The division had spread itself thin, adjusting to phantom signals, false readings, and minor anomalies that required localized responses. Each ship acting independently. Each commander making the correct decision based on the information available. And each one being pulled away from the others. What happened next? Sevrax asked. The answer came in silence. Because there was nothing left to show. They were engaged individually, the officer said quietly. And destroyed. No counterattack. None recorded. No retreat. No. Sevrax's claws flexed slowly. They didn't fight a fleet, he said. They dismantled one. No one argued. Because the pattern was undeniable now. The humans were not confronting strength. They were isolating it. Admiral, intelligence spoke again, urgency cutting through the tension. We've identified similar patterns across multiple sectors. Fleets adjusting independently, losing cohesion, then disappearing. How many? 5 divisions confirmed. Possibly more. The bridge fell into a heavy silence. 5 divisions. Not damaged. Not repelled. Erased. Why aren't we seeing the attacks? Someone asked, barely above a whisper. Sevrax answered. Because they're not happening where we're looking. He turned back to the display, eyes scanning the network of movement across the system. Every route. Every shift. Every decision. They're shaping our perception, he continued. We respond to what we think is happening. Not what is. A new alert flared. Admiral, priority transmission intercept. Source. Unknown. Same pattern as before. Brief signal burst across multiple frequencies. Display it. The message appeared, stark and simple. Phase 3 stable. A pause. Then. Segmentation complete. Sevrax felt something cold settle into his thoughts. Segmentation. They had divided his fleet. Not by force. By design. Reform all divisions, Sevrax ordered immediately. Centralize command. No independent maneuvering. No localized responses without direct authorization. The command went out. But even as it did, the communications officer hesitated. Admiral, signal delays are increasing. Some divisions may not receive orders in time. Sevrax did not look at him. Then we are already too late. Another alert. Admiral, new contacts, inner orbit, large-scale emergence. How large? We're still counting. Sevrax's gaze shifted to the inner system, where Earth waited, silent, unchanged, untouched. For a moment, everything aligned. The empty cities, the controlled corridors, the fragmented fleet, the missing divisions. They had not been fighting resistance. They had been preparing the battlefield. And now something was finally stepping onto it. "Bring it into focus," Sevrax said. The display sharpened. Shapes began to resolve. Not small vessels. Not scattered resistance. A formation. Massive. Hidden until now. Waiting. Sevrax did not speak for several seconds, because the realization came all at once. Everything they had encountered so far, the silence, the absence, the controlled losses, the vanished fleets, had not been the defense. It had been the setup. And whatever was now emerging near Earth was the first time humanity had decided to actually fight. For a long moment, no one spoke. The display expanded, magnifying the inner orbit until the shapes resolved into something undeniable. What Sevrax had first assumed to be a single formation fractured into layers, hundreds of vessels, arranged in patterns too deliberate to be random, too restrained to be aggressive. They were not advancing. They were waiting. "Count them," Sevrax said, his voice low. 300 confirmed, the tactical officer replied, still scanning. "Possibly more. Power signatures are suppressed." "Suppressed how?" "They're active," the officer said, struggling to reconcile the data. "But not fully. It's as if they are operating at a fraction of their capacity." Sevrax studied the formation carefully. Every ship held position with absolute precision. No drift. No micro-adjustments. No visible command signals coordinating them. They existed as if frozen, perfectly aligned, perfectly still. No fleet behaved like that. Not unless it had been placed there long before the battle began. "How long have they been in position?" Sevrax asked. A silence followed. "Then, we don't know," the officer admitted. "There are no entry signatures. No construction markers. No detectable deployment pattern." Sevrax's eyes narrowed. "They didn't arrive," he said quietly. "No, Admiral. They were always here." The realization shifted something fundamental. Every report, every anomaly, every missing piece of data. It wasn't that the humans had reacted quickly. It was that they had never needed to react at all. "Admiral," intelligence cut in, urgency rising. "We've accessed deeper archives from human communication networks, encrypted layers previously undetected." "Show me." The display shifted again, pulling fragments of data into view. Long-range planning documents. Simulation models. Strategic outlines. They were incomplete, but they were enough. "These records," the officer said, voice tightening. "They predate first contact." Sevrax turned slowly. "That's not possible. They are time-stamped decades before humanity confirmed extraterrestrial life. And yet," the officer hesitated, "they describe invasion scenarios, fleet behaviors, psychological responses, even command hierarchies." Sevrax felt it then, not fear, not yet, but something colder. Recognition. "They predicted us," he said. "Yes. Not us specifically," the officer clarified quickly. "But something like us. A technologically superior force. Expansionist. Overconfident. Pattern-driven." Sevrax's gaze returned to the silent fleet above Earth. "And they built for it." The officer didn't answer. He didn't need to. Another fragment surfaced, an internal designation. Engagement model. Invader pathway convergence. Sevrax stared at the words. "Define that," he said. "It appears to be a strategic doctrine," intelligence replied. "Rather than defending territory directly, the model focuses on influencing enemy movement, guiding them into predefined operational zones." "Zones," Sevrax repeated. The map shifted again, overlaying Dominion fleet positions across the system. Lines appeared. Connections. Patterns. Sevrax's breath slowed. Every movement his fleet had made since entering the system, every advance, every adjustment, every tactical decision. It was all there. Mapped. Predicted. Aligned with pathways that led inward. Toward Earth. No, someone whispered. Yes, Severax said. He saw it now with absolute clarity. The fragmentation of his divisions. The forced repositioning. The disappearing fleets. The narrowing corridors. None of it had been resistance. It had been direction. They're not reacting to us, Severax said, his voice barely above a whisper now. They're executing. The room held still. Because there was no denying it anymore. The invasion had not triggered a response. It had activated a plan. Admiral. Tactical control surged again. The formation near Earth is powering up. Severax snapped his attention back to the display. The silent fleet moved. Not forward. Not outward. But into alignment. Ships shifted positions with impossible precision, forming geometric layers, rings within rings, vectors intersecting at calculated angles. Energy signatures spiked, but still not to full capacity. They're not attacking, the officer said. Then what are they doing? Another demanded. Severax already knew. They're locking the board. A new signal burst across the system. Not intercepted. Broadcast. Every Dominion vessel received it simultaneously. Every screen flickered. Every system translated it instantly. A single message. Phase 4 commencing. Then, all units in position. Severax's claws tightened again, harder this time. Because he understood something now that he had not allowed himself to consider before. This was not a war. Not yet. This was the moment before the war. And everything that had happened so far, every loss, every movement, every decision, had only been the process of placing his fleet exactly where humanity wanted it. Another line appeared on the screen. Execution window. Open. Severax did not speak. He did not need to. Because for the first time since the invasion began, the question was no longer whether the Dominion would win. The question was, what exactly had they just been led into? The first shot was not aimed at a ship. It was aimed at space itself. A narrow beam of energy lanced outward from the human formation, not toward the Dominion fleet, but into the empty vacuum between them. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then reality bent. Severax watched as the beam's impact point distorted, space folding inward like fabric pulled too tight. Light warped. Sensor readings collapsed into noise. And then, with terrifying precision, the distortion snapped outward. The nearest Dominion cruiser vanished. Not destroyed. Not fragmented. Gone. Report. Severax barked, but the answer came in chaos. Ship designation lost. No debris, no energy signature. Admiral, it's just not there. Another beam fired. Another distortion. Another ship erased. The bridge erupted into overlapping commands as Dominion vessels scrambled to respond, shields flaring, weapons charging. But the human fleet did not advance. It did not pursue. It simply began selecting targets. They're not engaging the fleet, the tactical officer said, voice tightening. They're isolating key assets. Severax's eyes moved rapidly across the display. Command ships. Relay nodes. Navigation hubs. One by one, the structural anchors of his fleet were being removed, not randomly, not aggressively, but methodically. They're dismantling our ability to coordinate, Severax said. Yes, Admiral. Then adapt. Decentralize command. Autonomous engagement protocols. The order went out, but again, too slowly. Signal delays stretched longer. Data lagged. Ships responded to commands that were already obsolete by the time they arrived. They're ahead of us, someone said. No, Severax corrected. Colder now. They are us. The realization struck harder than any weapon. Every move the Dominion attempted, every adaptation, every correction, was being anticipated, mirrored, and countered before it fully formed. Because the humans had already modeled it. Admiral. Intelligence cut in, urgent. We're detecting internal system anomalies across multiple ships. Define anomaly. Behavioral overlap, Our tactical AIs are generating identical response patterns across different divisions. They're converging. Sevrax's gaze sharpened instantly. Converging on what? The answer appeared on the display. A projection. A predicted movement. Their own fleet. Repositioning. Not by command. Not by coordination. By reaction. Each ship, acting independently, making the correct tactical decision based on incomplete data. And those decisions, when combined, formed a pattern. A pattern that led directly into the densest region of human-controlled space. They're not forcing us, Sevrax said slowly. They're letting us choose. A new wave of human vessels emerged, not from the main formation, but from everywhere else. Asteroids split open. Debris fields ignited. Hidden platforms activated across the system. Hundreds of additional ships. No, thousands. All of them moving with synchronized precision. They were never just at Earth, the officer whispered. Sevrax didn't respond, because that truth was already clear. Earth had never been the center of the battlefield. It had been the anchor. Everything else, every asteroid, every station, every silent piece of infrastructure, had been part of the weapon. Admiral, incoming transmission, communications said suddenly. Source. Human. Display it. The screen flickered. A single figure appeared, not armored, not elevated, not imposing. Just a human, standing calmly against a neutral backdrop. No fear. No urgency. Just clarity. You advanced faster than projected, the human said, voice steady. That required minor adjustments. Sevrax did not speak. He watched. You were given 6 months, the human continued. We used 50 years. A pause. Not for effect. For understanding. You believed this would be a war, the human said. It isn't. The transmission cut. No follow-up. No threat. Just absence. Sevrax felt something unfamiliar press against the edges of his thoughts. Not fear. Not yet. Pressure. Because for the first time, he understood the scale of what he was facing. Not a fleet. Not a civilization. A system. A system that had been built, refined, and prepared long before his existence had ever mattered. Admiral! Tactical shouted. We're losing outer divisions. Rapid collapse across multiple sectors. Sevrax's eyes returned to the display. Ships were disappearing faster now, not just from the spatial distortions, but from coordinated strikes. Human vessels emerged, attacked, and vanished before retaliation could form. And everywhere, the pattern. Tightening. Closing. Guiding. Another alert. Admiral, we're detecting a new energy signature. Sevrax's voice dropped. Where? A hesitation. Everywhere. The bridge fell silent. Because the readings were impossible. Not a localized weapon. Not a single system. A network. Spanning the entire battlefield. Dormant nodes activating simultaneously across planets, stations, asteroid belts. All of it connecting. All of it aligning. What is it? Someone whispered. No one answered. Because no one understood it yet. But Sevrax did understand one thing. Everything happening now was still not the end. It was preparation. And whatever this new system was, had not been used yet. Another signal burst across every Dominion channel. Clear. Deliberate. Unavoidable. Final protocol ready. Sevrax did not move. Because for the first time since the invasion began, he no longer felt like he was losing. He felt like he had already lost, and was only now being shown how. The order to retreat was given twice. The first time, it was transmitted cleanly across primary command channels, encoded, confirmed, and dispatched with full authority. The second time, it was repeated manually, officer to officer, bypassing failing systems, carried by urgency rather than protocol. Neither attempt reached the entire fleet. Signal collapse across outer divisions, the communications officer reported, voice strained. We are no longer operating as a unified command. Sevrax stood unmoving, watching the display fracture into isolated clusters, remnants of what had once been a single, overwhelming force. Ships still responded, still fought, still executed orders where they could receive them, but the cohesion was gone. And without cohesion, the Dominion was not a fleet. It was a collection of targets. "Redirect all surviving units to exit vectors," Severax said, his tone measured, controlled. "Abandon contested zones. Prioritize withdrawal." For the first time in his command history, he spoke the word without resistance. Retreat. But even as the command left his lips, the tactical officer hesitated. "Admiral, exit vectors are compromised." Severax turned. "Explain." "Every viable path out of the system is occupied," the officer said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Human formations have repositioned. Not aggressively, just enough to intercept." Severax's gaze snapped back to the display. It was true. The routes they had used to enter, the corridors they had followed, the paths they had chosen, were no longer open. Human vessels had shifted into place, not forming walls, not blocking directly, but aligning in a way that forced any retreating ship into predictable trajectories. Trajectories that led through overlapping fields of fire. "They're not trapping us," Severax said slowly. "They're guiding us again. This time, not inward, but through a gauntlet. Alternative routes." Severax demanded. "Minimal," the navigation officer replied. "And all require deep traversal through high-density zones, asteroid belts, orbital debris, planetary gravity wells." "Then we take them." "Admiral," the officer hesitated. "Those zones are active." Severax understood immediately. Every environment, every obstacle, every piece of space that had once seemed incidental, was part of the system. There was no clean escape, because there had never been a clean entry. "Admiral!" Intelligence cut in again, urgency sharper than before. "We are detecting full synchronization across human networks. The energy signatures we observed earlier, they are stabilizing." "How long?" Severax asked. "Unknown. But they are aligning toward a single output." A single output. Severax's mind moved quickly. The distortions, the hidden fleets, the infrastructure, the coordinated strikes. All of it layered. All of it controlled. And now, converging. "Show me the projection," he said. The display shifted again, overlaying energy flows across the system. Lines of power stretched between nodes, stations, ships, planetary arrays, forming a vast, interconnected lattice. At its center, Earth. But the energy wasn't moving toward the planet. It was moving outward, expanding, building. "What is that?" someone whispered. Severax did not answer immediately, because the pattern was incomplete, because the purpose was still unclear, because they hadn't used it yet. "Admiral, incoming transmission," communication said suddenly, voice tight. "Source. Same as before. Display." The human appeared again. Unchanged. Unshaken. Watching. "You are attempting to withdraw," the human said, not as a question, but as a statement. Severax stepped forward slightly. "You have proven your point," he said, his voice controlled but edged. "This engagement is concluded." The human tilted their head slightly. "No," they said. "It isn't." A pause. "Not hostile. Not emotional. Just certain." "You still don't understand," the human continued. "This was never about stopping you." Severax's eyes narrowed. "Then what is it about?" The human held his gaze. "Making sure you never come back." The transmission cut. This time, it left something behind. Coordinates. A focal point. At the edge of the energy lattice. "Admiral," Tactical said, voice dropping. "That location, it's where all projected escape routes converge." Severax stared at the point. The realization hit harder than anything before it. "They're not blocking our retreat," he said quietly. "They're defining it." Another alert surged across the system. Energy levels spiking, system-wide, intelligence shouted. "The network is activating." The lattice ignited. Light, silent, controlled, impossibly vast, spread across the system, connecting every node, every platform, every hidden structure into a single unified construct. Ships caught within its influence began to lose power. Navigation systems failed. Weapons flickered. Not destroyed. Disabled. Controlled. "What is it doing?" someone demanded. Sevrax watched as the lattice expanded further, enclosing space itself within its reach. "It's not destroying us," he said. "No. It's rewriting the battlefield." Another pulse surged through the network. Stronger. Closer. The focal point brightened. Stabilized. Something was forming there. Not a weapon. Not yet. A gateway. A convergence. A final step. "Admiral," the navigation officer whispered, "if that activates, there will be nowhere left to go." Sevrax did not move, because for the first time, he understood the full scale of the design. The invasion had not been resisted. It had been accepted, directed, absorbed, and now it was about to be resolved. Another signal appeared across every Dominion system. Clear. Final. Final protocol initiating. Sevrax's claws tightened one last time. Because whatever humanity was about to do, it was not meant to win the war. It was meant to end the possibility of war itself. And they were about to show how. The light did not explode. It unfolded. From the convergence point at the edge of the system, the lattice tightened and then expanded in a controlled surge, not outward in violence but inward in precision, as if space itself had been rewritten to obey a new set of rules. Every Dominion vessel caught within its reach felt it instantly, not as damage, not as destruction, but as loss. Power vanished. Weapons systems shut down. Engines failed mid-burn. Control was not taken. It was removed. "Status," Sevrax demanded, though he already knew the answer. "Complete systems failure across all fleets," the tactical officer said, voice hollow. "We are inert." Sevrax looked at the display. Hundreds of Dominion warships, vessels that had conquered entire civilizations, hung motionless in space, stripped not of structure, but of purpose. Shields were gone. Drives were silent. Command links were dead. Even internal redundancies had collapsed as if they had never existed. They had not been destroyed. They had been denied. "Admiral," Intelligence said slowly, almost disbelieving, "the lattice is not attacking. It is maintaining a constant field. It's preventing reactivation." "For how long?" Sevrax asked. A pause. "We don't know," came the answer. "But the energy consumption, it's negligible. It could sustain indefinitely." Indefinitely. The word settled like gravity. Sevrax understood then. This was not a weapon designed to win. It was a system designed to end. Across the fleet, attempts to restore function failed one after another. Backup cores would not ignite. Emergency protocols would not trigger. Even manual overrides returned nothing. It was as if every pathway to resistance had been anticipated and quietly removed. "They're not killing us," someone whispered. "No," Sevrax said. His voice had changed. Not weaker. Clearer. "They're making sure we can't fight." A new transmission opened across every channel. Not forced. Not intercepted. Accepted. The human appeared again. Closer this time. Not on a distant screen, but projected into the very command interface itself, as if the system had simply decided to include them. "You can still hear me," the human said. It wasn't a question. Sevrax stepped forward, meeting the projection. "Yes." "Good," the human replied. "That means the protocol is functioning within acceptable parameters." Sevrax did not react to the phrasing. "Explain it," he said. The human regarded him for a moment. Not with hostility. Not with superiority. With something far more unsettling. Finality. "You believed this would end with destruction," the human said. "That you would either win or lose in a way you understood." Sevrax said nothing. "You were wrong," the human continued. "Destruction is inefficient. It invites retaliation. It creates cycles." A brief pause. "This," they gestured, not to a specific point, but to the entire system, "ends cycles." Sevrax's eyes narrowed slightly. "You have disabled a fleet," he said. "Others will come." The human nodded once. "Yes." No denial. No hesitation. Just acknowledgement. "And they will see this," the human continued. "They will analyze it. They will understand that any force entering human space will not be destroyed, but rendered irrelevant." Sevrax felt it then. Not fear. Not defeat. Recognition of scale. "You prepared this," he said slowly, "before we existed." "Yes." "For us." "No," the human said. "For anyone." The answer landed heavier than any weapon, because it meant this had never been about the Dominion. They were not the enemy. They were the example. Around them, the lattice pulsed once more, softly, steadily, maintaining its hold without strain, without escalation. The battlefield had not been cleared. It had been frozen, preserved as proof. "You had the capability to destroy us," Sevrax said. "You chose not to." The human's gaze held his. "We chose to send a message that would last longer." Sevrax looked out at the silent fleet, his fleet, immobilized across the system, every ship intact, every crew alive, every weapon useless. A living warning. "You could end us now," he said. "Yes." "And you won't." "No." The certainty in that answer was absolute. Not mercy. Not hesitation. Decision. "Why?" Sevrax asked. For the first time, something shifted in the human's expression. Not emotion. Clarity. "Because we want you to leave," they said. "And remember." The transmission ended. No final threat. No declaration of victory. Just silence. Sevrax stood for a long moment, staring at the inert fleet, at the system that had transformed from battlefield to boundary. Then, slowly, "Record everything," he said. His officers hesitated. "Admiral, we have no functional systems to transmit." Sevrax's gaze moved back to the projection point where the human had stood. "They will let us," he said, because now he understood the final layer. This had never been about stopping an invasion. It had been about defining a rule that did not need enforcement through constant war, a rule that enforced itself through certainty. "Prepare withdrawal," Sevrax continued. "Manual propulsion. Signal compliance across all remaining vessels." It would take time. It would take effort. But they would leave. And they would carry this with them. As the Dominion fleet began its slow, powerless retreat, the lattice did not pursue. It did not tighten. It did not escalate. It simply remained. A silent structure spanning the system. A boundary that did not need to be defended, because it could not be challenged. Far beyond the edge of the battlefield, the first Dominion ships crossed into open space, systems gradually restoring as they moved beyond the lattice's reach. Behind them, Earth remained untouched, unchanged, peaceful, as if none of it had ever happened. But the truth had already spread. Not through conquest, not through destruction, through understanding. Across the galaxy, long before the last Dominion ship had fully escaped, a new calculation had already begun to take hold in the minds of those who listened, those who watched, those who learned. Not a question of strength. Not a question of numbers. A certainty. If you entered human space, you did not fight a war. You triggered an outcome. And the outcome had already been decided long before you arrived.